Okay. Welcome back, everybody, to Shmuel Bet. After a long hiatus of 6 weeks, it's a shame Philip's not here because anybody remember the homework that I gave Philip? No? Okay. The homework that I gave Philip, he claimed, and actually Jeffrey also supported him on this, although I gave the homework to Philip, not to Jeffrey. Jeffrey was in support of this, who said that there was a line in Julius Caesar that said, "How the mighty are fallen." Because, of course, "How the mighty are fallen" is in our chapter. And Philip claimed that Shakespeare had plagiarized it from Shmuel Bet, and Jeffrey seemed to think that that was true. So I told Philip they had homework to do to find the line in Julius Caesar which says "How the mighty are fallen," and he's not here, so that's a shame. Oh, let me stop before we go any further. I want to dedicate the shiur to a refuah shalema for Johnny Halpern, who had a nasty fall just before Shabbat and has hurt himself rather badly. He's back at home now, battered and bruised, as I understand. But we wish him well, and we want to see him back here in the shiurim as soon as possible. We wish him a refuah shalema.
Amen.
Okay. So, Jeffrey, what do you think? Was he right?
Well, I left my Shakespeare at home. When I say at home, I don't mean at home. I mean in England. It was one of the books I didn't bring. So,
well, I will tell you.
I'm sure I've heard words to that effect.
Okay, well, that's a bit different. Words to that effect is slightly different to having those words in it. Anyway, I'll put you out of your misery, everyone, because I knew Philip wouldn't do the homework, so I did it for him. And here it is. There you go. In Julius Caesar, there is a line that says, "Oh, what a fall was there, my countrymen." And this appears in Act 3, Scene 2, after Caesar is assassinated. So the message is there, if not the exact words. It doesn't say, "Oh, how the mighty are fallen," but after Caesar is assassinated, we have a line that says, "Oh, what a fall was there, my countrymen." So there you are. You're right and you're wrong. You're right that the message is there. You're wrong that those actual words were not in Julius Caesar. But there you go. Very good. Interesting. No? Right. Let's go to what we're meant to be talking about, which is Shmuel Bet. Now, none of you will remember, I'm sure, where we got up to. But what we did up until now in Shmuel Bet was we analysed the story of how David came to hear about the death of Shaul and Jonathan from the Amalekite lad. And we analysed that, what was the significance of the Amalekite, and we also spoke about why David was so harsh to this Amalekite lad. And we came to the conclusion at the end of last time's shiur that the reason that he was immediately put to death was because of verse 16, which is on the screen. Shmuel Bet Chapter 1, verse 16, Jeffrey.
David said to him, "Your blood is on your own head, for your own mouth testified against you, saying, I put to death the anointed one of Hashem."
We know, don't we, from the Shmuel Aleph, that David is very, very careful about the anointed one of Hashem. He has the opportunity himself to kill Shaul on a couple of occasions and doesn't do so. And he says in that, and we did this last time, he says, "Far be it from me, Chalil Ali, far be it from me to lay a hand on the Lord's anointed." This Amalekite fellow comes along and admits that he killed Shaul, notwithstanding the fact that Shaul may or may not have asked him to do so. And David says, you are, as it were, hung by your own petard. You've said that you killed the Shaul. Shaul was the Lord's anointed, and that's it. You're done. And he gets put to death. I just used another expression there, hung by his own petard. Where's that from? Who was hung by his own petard?
I think it's hoist by your own petard, isn't it? It's not hung.
Okay, it doesn't make any difference. Same
Don't
idea.
know where it comes from.
You do.
I
all
don't
know where you all know where it came from. You've just forgotten. Hoisted by his own petard or hung on his own petard. Who was hung or hoisted on his own petard? Haman. Correct. Haman. Haman was hung on his own petard. What is a petard?
Must be a gallows or a scaffold.
It is a gallows, correct. Petard is a gallows. Haman made gallows for Mordecai, did he not? And he went to the king in the middle of the night. He couldn't even wait. He had ADHD, Haman. We know that because he couldn't even wait till the morning to go and ask for permission to hang Haman. He went in the middle of the night. And he says, he wanted to hang Haman, wanted to hang Mordecai. And who was it that said to Achashverosh that Haman had prepared gallows for Mordecai?
Esther.
No, Esther did not say it.
Oh.
Somebody who we remember for good, Zachor Latov. And we say it in the song, Shoshanat Yaakov. Help us out, David. Who was it?
Charvona.
Charvona. Charvona, Zachor Latov. Charvona says to Achashverosh in the heat of the moment, oh, by the way, that Haman fellow, he's prepared these gallows for Mordecai. And what does Achashverosh say? 2 words. Teluhu alav. Hanging on them. In other words, Haman was hanged or hoisted on the petard that he had made for Mordecai. Hoisted or hanged or hung on his own petard. That expression comes from Megillat Esther.
Apparently, I just looked at Wikipedia at the same time, and there's a Shakespeare connection, because it says here, hoist with his own petard is a phrase from a speech in Shakespeare's Hamlet that has become proverbial.
Okay, well, does it comment that Shakespeare got it from Haman?
It doesn't actually, but maybe if I were to dive deeper into the article, it would.
Okay, Lydia, you just got yourself some homework for next week.
No, Lydia
find
got
out.
it right, because in French, pétard is a bomb.
Yes,
It's a bomb.
It's a bomb, and the idea was that the guy blew himself up with his own bomb. So he hoisted. Well done, Lydia.
Okay, Lydia, that's your homework. Try and find an admission by William Shakespeare that he took that expression from Megillat Esther.
Okay.
Because Haman was indeed hoisted or raised up on his own petard. Okay, yes, Jeffrey.
Shakespeare. Not many people could read and write in the age of Shakespeare, and Shakespeare was obviously taught to read and write by clergymen. Those were the people who could read and write, and they probably the only book that they probably possessed was the Bible. So he was probably well versed in Torah.
Yes, yeah. I would agree with that. I think that's very accurate. The clergy, and just as an aside, the clergy, in complete contrast to the Jewish clergy, the Christian clergy kept the people illiterate deliberately kept the people illiterate in order to preserve their power, because literacy confers power. If you can read and nobody else can read, then you're in a position of power. Now that Masha'en Cain is not the case with the rabbis, who from time immemorial have stressed the need for educating the people. Education, 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 to quote an ex-prime minister. The Jewish way is always been education. And that was not the case with the Christian clergy. They deliberately kept the people ignorant in order to preserve their power. But I'm sure you're right, Jeffrey, that that Shakespeare will have known the Bible very, very well indeed. So Lydia's got some homework now for next week. I'm sure Lydia will be far more diligent in her homework than others. Let's not go any further. Right, let's go back to the screen. And so that's what we did last time. We talked about the Amalekite and why he was killed. And now we started this last time, and that's how we came to how the mighty are fallen. We're now going to go into David's lament over Shaul and Jonathan in some significant detail. We'll probably take this week and next week to go through this lament. And of course, what is the one thing we know about David? David was a poet, right? Sefer Tehillim was written by David. David was a very exalted soul, okay? He was a poet. He was a musician. We know that. He played the harp or the lyre for Shaul to calm Shaul down when Shaul was having one of his episodes. He was a poet, wrote Tehillim. He was obviously the kind of person who had a very sensitive soul. Of that, I mean, this is what makes David, I think, such a fascinating character and such a wonderful role model, because often you have people who can be a gibor, you can have the great soldier, the fighter, the one who's brave, and you might have a different person who is the sensitive soul, the poet, the musician, the soft person. David was all of these rolled together. He was the king, he was the soldier, he was the person that expanded the kingdom, brought everybody together, the unifier, and yet he had this incredibly sensitive soul that was able to write Sefer Tehillim, was to write these kind of laments. David is an amazingly complex and wonderful character, and of course he was a flawed character, because we know that, don't we? We'll come to it in due course where the various things that he did, but not least of all with Bathsheba, and his ability to do teshuvah. So, you know, out of all the characters in Israel, I mean, we just said earlier on, didn't we, that Shimshon didn't have a great deal to you know, to sort of to name people after. He was a philanderer. He was not necessarily a good person all round. Shaul, an incredibly flawed person, although he did try, but he failed on so many accounts. David, on the other hand, seems to have all the qualities that we would look for in a role model, and maybe that's why we say David Melech Yisrael, that David was the king of Israel. He was, I mean, go further on, Shlomo. Look at Shlomo. Shlomo was an incredibly flawed character. He failed in many of his missions. He built the Beit HaMikdash, granted, but he failed in chapter 17 of Devarim, didn't he? Where you're told, don't have too many horses, don't have too many wives, and don't have too much money. Failed on all of those. And then he overtaxed the people, was a very unpopular king, and shortly after his death, the kingdom split into two. So Shlomo was not, you know, the greatest role model. David, on the other hand, is our Melech Yisrael, and I think it's worth bearing that in mind, because what we're going to be doing over the next few months is we're going to be looking at the life of David in great detail. And we'll see a contrast between the way Tanakh, the author of Tanakh, the author of Shmuel in particular, describes Shaul, which isn't very complimentary, to the way that the author portrays David, which is in a very positive light. So it's very clear we'll see as we go along where the loyalties of the author of Shmuel lies. By the way, just to remind everybody, Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet are really one book. It was the Christians that split it into two because it was just too long. They couldn't handle one long book of Shmuel, so they split it into two fairly arbitrarily. So when we're talking about Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, it's really only an arbitrary and artificial split of the book. So now we're going to go. And,
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In our learning, I've been sort of quietly listening to your description of various people in the Tanakh. And the question arises, in our learning, are we looking for perfect, exceptional people, or are we looking for a way to lead our lives and things we shouldn't do as well as things that we should do, and looking for models amongst people who are just as human as we are?
I'm glad you asked that question, Hannah, because this is one of, I mean, those of you who've followed my shiurim over the years will know that this is one of my particular hobby horses. We do not believe in saints. We do not believe in people being perfect. And I have a real problem with the Jewish education that beyond junior school level, which persists in teaching that the rabbis, the people in Tanakh, our heroes, were faultless. And that is persisted in. You know, you're not allowed to comment. We're coming up to Parashat Toldot in a few weeks' time, which is known in our family as Rina's Parsha. My daughter Rina. Why is that known as Rina's Parsha? Because we got called into school on Parashat Toldot, into the Beis Yaakov school that Rina attended. Why? Because it says in the Parsha of Toldot that Yitzchak loved Esav and Rivka loved Yaakov. And the implication there is that there was that Rivka did not love Esav. Now, Rina was about 14 at the time, and she had been brought up in our house where we had all sorts of miscreants coming to our house, including my own boys at the time, who were miscreants to a degree, but they were magnets to kids who were sort of, you know, hovering off the derech, if you like. And we had all sorts coming through to our house, and many of them who'd been rejected by their own parents because they weren't toeing the line. And that's what she was used to. And she said, in all honesty and innocence, in the school, in the lesson, she said, well, it's not surprising Esav went off the derech. His mother didn't love him. Right? Which is actually an incredibly astute observation. And in fact, it's something that the Ramban points out as well. The Ramban is very critical of Rivka for that. Anyway, we got hauled in to the headmaster, and Rina got in trouble. How dare you speak about Rivka Imenu in such a way? And she was hauled off to the thing, right? Because Rivka Imenu, chas v'shalom, can't possibly do anything wrong. And we got hauled into the headmaster, and I had it out with the headmaster and said, you will need to teach your teachers how to teach, and teach them a bit of Ramban while you're at it. Instead of criticizing a girl for doing that, she should be praised for an astute observation, which the Ramban had even made. Anyway, we had it all out. And the answer that the headmaster gave to me, to Rina, was, Rina, if you have those kind of comments in the future, don't say them in the class. Come to me and we'll discuss them. And we were outraged by this, because this is not a Jewish way. Hannah is absolutely right. We do not, in the Jewish religion, believe in saints who could do no wrong. Avraham Avinu did very little wrong in his life. Yitzchak didn't do more. We don't know much about Yitzchak. Yaakov did plenty little things that weren't right. Okay? Moshe Rabbeinu, we're told, the greatest man that ever lived, made mistakes. Shaul, we can see from Shmuel Aleph, tons of mistakes. We are there to learn, as Hannah put it very, very well. We are there, the Torah and Tanakh is there to teach us how to lead our lives. We learn from the good things that people do, and we learn how not to do things from the bad things that people do. How many times have you said to yourself when you've seen somebody do something, that's terrible, I would never do such a thing? And that's a learning experience, right? You've learned something there. You've observed something which you see is not right. And you have, as it were, inculcated that into yourself and said to yourself, I will never do such a thing. That's terrible. And you learn more how not to do things than you do from how to do things. I've told you this before many, many times, but I'm going to say it again because Hannah's asked the question. I didn't plant that question, but if I had to plant a question, I would have planted that one. When I used to teach Moilim how to become a Moil, I used to send them out with two people. There was one Moil in Manchester, Maya Halpern, who was the best Moil I've ever seen, even to this day, the best Moil I've ever seen. He was brilliant, technically brilliant, brilliant with the parents, absolutely fantastic. And I used to send them also out with another one whose name I'm going to mention, who was awful, who should not have been allowed loose on anyone. And I used to tell them, right, go out for the day and follow Maya, come and tell me what you've learned, and go out with so-and-so and come back and tell me what you've learned. And they learned more from so-and-so, how not to do it, how not to faff around and make a big performance of everything. And they were on the ball, these people. They knew, they saw how not to do it. And they learned more from that than they did from Maya. And I absolutely maintain that Jewish education is immature to the degree that we are missing a huge amount that we can learn from how not to do things. And I think that's all the way through Tanakh, including the Chumash, and all the way through Tanakh. We see people have faults, and our job is to look at that and say, I'm going to do my best not to behave in that bad way. And that's how you learn. That is how you learn. You look at people, you have role models. I want to be like him, and I don't want to be like him. Yes, Ivor.
I think that's maybe one of the reasons that Lubavitcher Rebbe famously said that when we see something in somebody else that bothers us, it's because, in fact, there's a spark of that in us. Otherwise, we wouldn't identify it.
Yeah, the Lubavitcher Rebbe there is quoting a Gemara that says, when you see something in somebody, it's like a mirror into your heart.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, if you see somebody be mean and it bothers you, then you need to look into your own heart. Is there a situation where I've been mean to somebody, about somebody in a situation? Because it's telling you something. If it bothers you, it's telling you something. Absolutely. So to answer Hannah's question simply, all of this, the stories we're learning in Tanakh, I believe that they are there in all their glory and gory, right? They're all there to tell us how we should behave and how we shouldn't behave. And if we're not learning from both, then we are largely missing the point. I accept that in junior school, we have to gloss over those things. But once you get past junior school, we need to mature in our thoughts. We need to mature in our learning. And most importantly, the teachers who are teaching need to mature in their teaching. It's one of the reasons that I started Tchelet altogether. I forgot to put the Tchelet background on, I've just realized. And never mind, we'll do it next week. Because I felt that the teaching was missing that honesty and that inspiration. So anyway, thank you for that question, Hannah. Let's go back to
my question was in two parts. Part of it was, if that's your answer, and I agree with you 100%, then people could maybe call their children Shaul because they see a lot of worthy things in him that one can learn from. And maybe they don't want their child to make all the mistakes, but they still want their child to be somebody who can teach others how to behave or not to behave or whatever.
Could be. For
these
me
people
personally,
are now.
It could be that. For me personally, I would not want to call my kid after a person who did not fulfill his potential. and dramatically didn't fulfill his potential. But that's just my view. You know, we've lost you a bit there. We've lost you. You're in and out. Can't hear you. We're going to move on. Right. Let's move on to the lament of David of Shaul and Jonathan. We are. Have we still got the screen up? Yeah.
I think that if the people are in Tanakh, then there must be something worthwhile about them.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. We're going to move on. Yeah, we can't hear you very well, but we're moving on. Right. David lamented with this lamentation over Saul. Jeffrey, verse 17 onwards, please.
David lamented this dirge over Saul and Jonathan his son. He said, "Behold, this is written in the book of uprightness. O precious one of Israel, upon your heights lie the slain. How have the mighty fallen?" Okay,
stop there. And we're going to go into each of the verses in great detail now. So, first of all, the first thing, verse 17. Just say 17 again for us.
David lamented this dirge over Saul and Jonathan his son.
Okay, now, the first thing I want to note about this is the greatness of David. I understand that he would lament over Jonathan because Jonathan was his friend. Maybe others say that he was more than a friend. We'll not go into that right now. But he was somebody who he was very, very close to. And obviously there was an emotional tie there. And he's just heard that his best friend has been killed. I understand that. But the greatness of David, we know, we've already seen the greatness of David, the way he has related to Shaul up till now, despite the fact that Shaul has wanted to kill him. Had David killed Shaul back in the two opportunities that he had, that we learnt about, when he cut the skirt of Shaul on that one occasion, and the other occasion when he took the spear and the water, if you remember, had he killed him, David would have had a reasonable excuse. What was the excuse would have been?
Kill somebody before they kill you.
Yes. Shaul was a rodef. He was a pursuer. The halacha of a rodef is you have an obligation to kill him before he kills you. So there would have been justification for David to do that, and he didn't do it. Actually, the first shows the first greatness of David. Here we see another level. All right, he didn't want to kill the anointed of the Lord, but now somebody else has done it, or he's killed himself, or however it's happened. David is lamenting not only just over Jonathan, but he's lamenting over Saul. He's lamenting over somebody who wanted to kill him. That's an incredibly high level of I don't know what to call it, really. It's greatness. I believe that's a display of the greatness of David's character. That and you'll see as we go through it, he's lamenting over Shaul just as much as he's lamenting over Jonathan. He's not just, this is a lament over Jonathan, and by the way, Shaul. You'll see as we go through it. Perhaps won't finish this week, maybe next week. You'll see that there is as much lamentation over Shaul as there is of Jonathan. And I think that's, first of all, is worth mentioning to David's immense credit, that he is not saying, well, I'm glad to be rid of him because he keeps chucking spears at me, and I've had to remember, he's not just had to dodge spears. He's had to go into exile. He had to hide amongst the Pelishtim. He had to go to Gat. He had to hide out in Ein Gedi and all of these places. Shaul had caused him significant grief in his life. This was not, it would be perfectly justified in my mind to have said, well, I'm glad to see the back of him, to tell you the truth, because he's given me a hard time. But he doesn't do that. Yes, Jeffrey?
So maybe he lamented because his wife had to sit shiva.
Maybe. Yes, it doesn't say so, but maybe. That's certainly something. Yes. It was his father-in-law, after all. That's a fair point. either way, I think it demonstrates the greatness of David, that he's lamenting over Shaul as well as Jonathan. Now, verse 18.
Can I just stop you there? Do you think there's something that we should take out of that for how we should be reacting as a people to what's happening now? You know, like when Nasrallah or any of those terrorist leaders were killed, there were those who went out in the street and danced and so on. Is that?
That's a fair point, Lydia. I have a problem with that personally. Just to talk about the Shmuel Bet and the situation you've just described, I don't think the two things are the same. I'll come back to what I think about rejoicing over the death of our enemies in a minute. But there is a difference here, in that Shaul. Wait, hang on a minute. Let me finish, Hannah. Let me finish before you jump in. Shaul was a king of Israel. Shaul was a Gibor. He had fought at the end of his life. He knew he was going to die. The witch of Endor had told him that tomorrow you're going to die. Shmuel had said to him in this witch thing, tomorrow you'll be with me, i.e. in the netherworld. And yet he put on his armor and he went out to battle. At the end of the day, Shaul was not all bad. Shaul was had a personal problem with David as part of his mishigas. Shaul was mentally ill, right? He was schizophrenic, paranoid. That's clear from Shmuel Aleph. There's a massive difference between Shaul, Melech Israel, who is protecting the Jewish people and has an individual problem with David, to somebody like Sinwar and Nasrallah, whose stated aim is to destroy the Jewish people. I think there's a massive difference there. So I don't draw any conclusion from Shmuel Bet to Nasrallah and Sinwar. What I do say about that, the fact that you raised, and that is the celebrating the death of our enemies. I personally am uncomfortable with going out into the streets and celebrating, because that is what we see them do when they commit a terrorist atrocity and kill our people. They go out in the streets and celebrate. They fire their guns and give out sweets and cakes to people. And we need to make a distinction between Am Yisrael. We say it every Motzei Shabbat, right? Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lacho, ben Or Lachoshech, ben Yisrael la'amim. We are not like other people. We should not be doing that in public. Do I rejoice in my heart that there is one less enemy who is going to be no longer able to commit the atrocities of the 7th of October? Yes, I do. But I think it needs to be a personal and private rejoicing in the heart, and not a public rejoicing and gloating over the death of our enemies. I wish that we'd never had to kill Sinwar, because I wish Sinwar had not done the things that he'd done. And so I think it's very, very important that we behave in a way which is Or Lagoyim, a light unto the nations, that we do not publicly express rejoicing over the death of our enemies. We can say good riddance to the man and his ideas. I don't celebrate it in public because we're different to that. I rejoice in my heart that there is there's one less person who's going to harm us, and that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But we need to in my view, we need to demonstrate that there is a havdalah ben Yisrael la'amin. There is a havdalah between us and other people, and particularly those barbarians. We cannot criticize them for doing something if we then go and do the same thing ourselves. We have to be above that, and we have to show the world how to behave. And if we show the world how to behave, there's a half a chance that some of the world, at least, will recognize that. There's a big chance that most of the world won't recognize it anyway. But it doesn't matter. We have to behave the way we have to behave. So for me, a private celebration that there is no longer a particular person who can damage us because he's now in the netherworld in Gehinnom. That's something to be celebrated in my heart, but not in public where the world can see that we are just as bad as them. That's my view on that particular point. But I don't think it's the same from here, because here we're talking about a very personal relationship between Shaul and David, which actually was driven by mental illness. Had Shaul not been mentally ill, I don't think that he would have acted like he did towards David. It's quite clear, and Tanakh tells us, we've learnt it through Shmuel Aleph. It says that the Ruach Ra'ah came upon him, this bad spirit came upon him, and that's when he wanted to chuck the spear at David. He had these episodes of depression, paranoia, schizophrenia, whatever they were, his behavior was driven by mental illness. And he was a king of Israel. And as Hannah said before, he's not all bad. I just think he's a sad character because he never fulfilled his potential as king of Israel. And that's why I personally wouldn't want to call my kid a Shaul. I would want to call my kid Avraham, who did fulfill his potential, or Moshe Rabbeinu, or whatever it is. So I think there's a huge difference. I don't think we can draw a comparison between that, but nevertheless, it is what it is. Okay, so
can I say something?
Yes.
As to rejoicing over people being killed, Sinwar, etc., we say, I think every morning, every day, Shirat Hayam. And Shirat Hayam was, we sang when the Egyptians drowned. And on the other hand, God said to the angels when they started to rejoice, my creatures are being drowned, and you rejoice. So maybe because we were directly affected by what happened on the 7th of October, and unfortunately it could have happened to any one of us or many more people, we're allowed to rejoice, maybe not the way they do, but be happy about it. But
agreed.
On the other hand,
agreed. And that's why I say we can rejoice in our hearts and we can rejoice privately. And if I'm sitting around my Shabbat table and a guest says to me, what do you think about Sinwar's death? I'm thinking, thank God for that. I'm very happy about it. But yes, I maintain, and you're right, God says to the angels, you shouldn't be celebrating. These are my creatures. And we do it on Pesach, don't we? We don't say full Hallel after the first day of Pesach for that very reason. Our rejoicing is reduced a bit because God's creatures have been killed. So it's not for us to be going out and rejoicing in public. And I think that what you're saying, Hannah, supports that view rather than challenges it.
No, I'm supporting it. I'm just saying that there is a basis in Torah that we're allowed to be happy if our enemies die. Yeah.
Yes, but not in public.
No. Agreed. 100%.
Okay. Right. So let's go on to verse 18, Jeffrey.
He said, we must, in brackets, teach the children of Judah the archer's bow. Behold, this is written in the book of uprightness.
Okay, stop there. What on earth is that pasuk about? Right, we've just said in verse 17, David lamented with this lamentation over Saul. And then just read 19 for us, Jeffrey.
O precious one of Israel, upon your heights lie the slain. How have the mighty fallen?
So that's the beginning of the lament. So what is verse 18 doing there between 17 and 19? 17 should be followed immediately by 19. David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son, O beauty of Israel. And instead, we've got an interruption that's talking about teaching how to become an archer. What is all that about? What is verse 18 doing there? Doesn't fit. Any suggestions, anyone? Why is verse 18 stuck there in the wrong place?
Look, it goes back a bit to what you said before, that the admiration that David had for Saul as a Gibor, as a warrior who went out to fight. He was a Gibor leading Giborim. The people of Israel who went out to fight saw and took the leadership from Shaul and fought and fell as warriors.
Okay. Oh, so you think this is part of the actual lament?
Lament, did you?
To me, it reads completely different. I'll tell you how it reads to me, Ivor. It reads to me, Vayomer lilamed b'nei Yehuda keshet. Shaul has just been killed, and we've suffered a very, very bad defeat, right? We need to learn how to become better archers. Teach them how to become archers. I'll tell you why I think that's the case. Have a look at this on the screen. This is the last chapter of Shmuel Aleph. Jeffrey, read out the blue for us, please.
And the battle fell heavy upon Saul, and the archers found him, and he was very much frightened of the archers.
Right, so Shaul was done in by the archers. It seems that the Plishtim were better archers than we were. And that's why at the beginning of this lament, David, it's almost as if he's saying, oh, if only we had had better archers, Shaul wouldn't have died. We need to teach the Bnei Yehuda how to be archers.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, why? So that's why I think we've got the arching, the bow, right? Why Bnei Yehuda? Why not Bnei Yisrael? Okay, David is the leader of Yehuda. What tribe was Shaul from?
Benjamin.
Benjamin. Okay. Now then, what we all know, don't we, even from today's military situation, that there are different units for different things, right? Shirion is the tank unit, and all the other different units. Tzanchanim are the paratroopers, etc., etc. It was the same then. Each different tribe had a particular skill in warfare. How do you know that Binyamin was the tribe that was proficient in archery and Yehuda was not?
Jonathan was a brilliant archer.
Yes, we know that Jonathan was involved in archery. How do we know that, Ivor?
From when he fired his arrows as a distance mark at that time.
Correct. When we fired his arrows as a distance marker, when he took his leave of David. Correct. When will we read that story, Ivor?
You're pushing your luck now.
You know this.
Yeah.
When do we read that story? Vayomer Yehonatan el David. Next words. Machar Chodesh.
Yeah.
Right? It's the Haftorah when Rosh Chodesh is a Sunday, which will be, by the way, in 4 weeks' time, Parshat Toldot, Rena's Parsha, because Parshat Toldot is Erev Rosh Chodesh this year, and the Haftorah of Toldot this year will be exactly the story you just told us. Vayomer Yehonatan al David. Jonathan said to David, Machar Chodesh, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, and you'll be missed at the feast. We've done it. We did it in when we did Shmuel Aleph. So we know, well done, Ivor, we know that Jonathan, or Yehonatan, as we give him his full name, was an archer, and he was from Binyamin. There is something else. Have a look at this. This is from chapter... what chapter is it from? Chapter 20 of Shoftim. Going back, we've learnt this together a few years ago. It took us 4 years to do Shmuel Aleph, and this is towards the end of Shoftim. So this is probably 4.5 years ago we learnt this, maybe a bit more. This is the story of the Pilegesh Ber Giv'ah, the concubine, not porcupine, concubine of Giv'ah. Remember the story where the concubine was raped to death, and there was almost civil war. Well, there was civil war between the tribe of Binyamin and the rest of Bnei Israel. Remember that story? Look at this verse, the blue verses for us, Jeffrey.
And the children of Benjamin numbered on that day out of the cities 26,000 men that drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who numbered 700 chosen men. Of all these people, there were 700 chosen men with a shriveled right hand, in brackets with that. All these could sling a stone at a hair breadth and not miss.
Okay, so this the Mephoreshim tell us that these people were 700 men with a shriveled right hand, and they were throwers of stones, and they were very accurate throwers that had been fielding on the boundary because they could have a good arm and they'd have got it right over the stumps, right? But why did they have a shriveled right hand? Because previously they'd been archers. And Binyamin is the tribe which were archers. Have a look at this. This is Divrei Hayamim. Read it on the screen for us.
The sons of Judah, bearing shield and spear, 6,800 armed men of the army.
So the tribe of Yehudah, they were shield and spear soldiers, right? They were infantry, shield and spear. Have a look at this.
And from Benjamin was a mighty warrior, Eljada, and with him, armed with bow and shield, were 200,000.
200,000 men with bow and shield. Bow and shield, as opposed to Yehudah, spear and shield. So from Divrei Hayamim, we learn that the tribe of Binyamin were archers, and the tribe of Yehudah were close combatants. Archers are the snipers, aren't they? They are distance fighters. Shield and spear, that's up close. So when we go back to our pasuk, David is saying, we need to teach the sons of Judah the bow. Remember, he's Judah. He's the leader of Judah. He's saying, we don't know how to shoot these archers. It's clear that these archers of the Philistines, they were the ones that won the war. We did it. Look, the battle fell heavy upon Saul, and the archers found him, and he was very frightened of the archers. So David is saying, we need to regroup here. We need to relearn. We need to teach. I need to teach my men a new skill. I need to teach them how to be archers, because that is what has won this war, this battle, the Philistines over Shaul. Shaul was killed by the archers. So this is part of the lament, Ivor. You're right, but not in the way you said. It's saying we don't know how to use these bow. We need to learn how to use the bow, because had we learned how to use the bow, then we would have been able to repel the archers of the Philistines, and Shaul would not have been killed. So that's the first part of verse 18. The second part of verse 18, behold, it is written in the book of the just. And I think Jeffrey said book of the upright in his translation. Did you say upright, Jeffrey?
I think I did.
Yeah, verse 18.
Uprightness.
Uprightness, yeah. The Hebrew is yashar. Yashar meaning? Straight. You ask somebody for directions and they say yashar, it means go straight ahead. So what is this Sefer HaYashar, this book of the upright, or book of uprightness? What is it? It says, it's written, Hinei Ktuva al Sefer HaYashar. This is written. What is written? Well, I assume it means that what we're going to hear next, the lament, is written in the book of the just. Or maybe it's what we've just said, that David said we need to teach how to be archers. Maybe that's written in the book of the just. What is this book of the just? Any suggestions? Well, we've come across the book of the just previously in Sefer Yehoshua. Now, it took us 4 and a bit years to do Shmuel. It took us about 3.5 years to do Shoftim. This is about halfway through the book of Yehoshua. So we're probably 10 years ago since we learned this together. So I don't expect you to remember it. But you'll know the story. Who doesn't remember the story of the sun standing still in Givon? Yes, Yehoshua said, "Az yedaber Yehoshua Hashem bayom tet Hashem et Amori lifnei bnei Israel, vayomer leinei Israel," and he said in the eyes of Israel, "Shemesh begivon dom v'yareach ba'emek ayalon." Jeffrey, read the blue for us on the screen, please.
Then Joshua spoke to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun stand still upon Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ayalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Yeshua, which is the Torah? So the sun stood still in the midst of the heaven, and it did not hasten to go down exactly a whole day.
So there's Sefer HaYashar. There you are. Can you see it? In Sefer Yehoshua, this book of Yashar, which we've got here in our chapter here. We're back on our chapter here now, Sefer HaYashar. Back to Yehoshua, Sefer Yashar. It's the same book. Now, the Chabad translation, which is on the screen, tells us that Sefer HaYashar, the book of the just, or the book of the upright, is the Torah. Where does Chabad get to say that from? Did it make it up? No. I'm going to show you a Gemara now for the last 5 minutes. I'm going to take you to Gemara Avodah Zarah, page 25a. Okay, there's a whole discussion about what is this book of Yashar. I don't know if you can see the screen. Can you see the screen? Yeah? Okay, so this is from Sefaria. This is Avodah Zarah 25a. There's the Hebrew. It's a great Sefaria, by the way. It's an amazing tool. You've got just about everything there, and you can have it in Hebrew, just in English, or both. The Gemara provides... Oh, I need to go further up. That was the end of it. Here we go. The Gemara cites a series of expositions, what is called the Book of Yashar. The Gemara asks the question, what is this Book of Yashar? And then the verse, it quotes our verse of Yehoshua that we've just said, the sun stood still, the moon stayed. Is this not written in the Book of Yashar? The Gemara asks, what is the Book of Yashar? Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, this is Genesis, Sefer Bereshit. And which is, whose story do we read in Bereshit? Mainly, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This is Genesis, which is the book of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And they are known as Yesharim. The Avot are known as Yesharim, straight and upright people. Okay? Upright. So they say, so Rabbi Chia says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Sefer HaYashar is Bereshit. We've got a problem with that. What's the problem with that? What's the problem with Rabbi Yochanan's view that Sefer HaYashar is Bereshit? Anyone? Look at the pasuk from Yehoshua and tell me what it says. The sun stood still, the moon stayed until the nation had avenged their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Yashar? Do you know anywhere in Sefer Bereshit where it says the sun stood still for Yehoshua? No, of course not, because Yehoshua was way in the future. So that's a bit problematic. We don't actually, well, there we go. So the Gemara obviously asks that question. The Gemara is not as, it's not stupid. And the Gemara says, and where is it alluded to in Genesis that the sun would still stand still for Joshua? The verse states in reference to Ephraim, who was Joshua's ancestor. Joshua was from the tribe of Ephraim. In Genesis 48:19, when will he become a multitude of nations? He became a multitude of nations at the time when the sun stood in place for Joshua. And it says, and the sun stayed in the midst of the heaven, hastened not to go down for an entire day. So he says that he became a multitude of nations, meaning that Yehoshua became famous in history at that time when he got the sun to stand still. And that is why Rabbi Yochanan says it was in Genesis. I think that's a bit schwach myself. And then it goes on to talk, the whole Gemara talks about how long it stood still for, the sun and all that stuff. And it goes on about the sun standing still. We're not going to do that right now. And then we come to this bit. The Gemara then cites another opinion as to what the book of Yashar is. And then it quotes our pasuk from Shmuel Bet. The Gemara says, what about the pasuk that says to teach the sons of Judah the bow? Behold, it is written in the book of Yashar. That's our pasuk. And so he says that. And then he quotes that before, and he says about the bow. Where does it say about? There we go. And Rabbi Elazar says it's not Bereshit, it's Devarim. Yashar is the book of Deuteronomy. Yashar is the book of Devarim. Why is it called Yashar? We said Bereshit was Yashar because of the people who were Yesharim. What does it say 5 times in Sefer Devarim? My favorite pasuk in the whole Torah. V'asita et hatov v'hayashar beinei Hashem. You shall do that which is good and yashar, upright in the eyes of Hashem. There you are. It quotes one of those 5 times here. You shall do that which is right and good in the sight of the Lord. And where is it alluded to that Judah must be taught to use the bow? And it says there in Devarim, here, this is a bit stretched if you ask me, but this is where it is. Read that for us, Jeffrey, in blue on the screen.
May this, in brackets, also be for Judah. And he, Moses, in brackets, said, O Lord, hearken to Judah's voice and bring him to his people. May his hands do battle for him, and may you be a help against his adversaries.
Okay, so first of all, where have you heard that recently, that pasuk? I would suggest that you probably heard this 10 times in the last 4 days. At least 10 times, maybe more. Recognize it? I'll lane it for you and see if you recognize it. V'zot li Yehuda vayomar Shema Adonai kol Yehuda ve'el amo tvienu yadav ravlo ve'eza mitzarav tiyeh. Where have you heard that?
It's the laning in Chol HaMoed.
It's the laning of Simchat Torah. It's V'zot HaBracha that we lane over and over and over again, which is why I said you probably heard it 10 times, at least if you were listening carefully. V'zot HaBracha. It's the end of the first parasha of V'zot HaBracha. And it says, so what's this got to do with bows? It's a bit shvach if you ask me, but it says so anyway. O Lord, hearken to Judah's voice and bring him to his people. May his hands, plural, do battle for him. And the Gemara says, let's go back to the Gemara. The Gemara brings this pasuk and says, what is the form of warfare that requires the use of both hands? Bow and arrow. You need two hands for a bow and arrow. And that is the allusion to this pasuk, according to the Gemara. So Sefer HaYashar, according to this opinion, is Sefer Dvarim. There's a third opinion, and we'll finish with that. The Rebbe Shmuel Bet Chapter says that the book of Yashar is the book of Shoftim. Why? Because of this pasuk here, which is mentioned a few times also in Shoftim. And in those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his eyes. In other words, anarchy. This was the time of anarchy. And that is Sefer Yashar, because it says, Ish hayashar be'einav yaseh. Every man did that which was yashar in his mind. And where is it alluded to about the bow? Well, in Shoftim, we have another pasuk that says, only that the generations of the children of Israel might know to teach them war. And he says, what is the form of warfare that requires teaching? What the most difficult form of warfare that needs a lot of teaching is archery. So there's three opinions. Go back to our verse pasuk here. He said to teach the sons of Judah the bow. That is written in the book of the Just. Three opinions in the Gemara of what the book of the Just is: Bereshit, Dvarim, and Shoftim, and they all bring a different proof. And all that in one little pasuk there. So let's just summarize what we did today. We talked about David's great character, that he was willing and wanted to lament Shaul as much as Jonathan. We talked about whether we should be celebrating, or how we should be celebrating the death of our enemies, or how we should not be celebrating the death of our enemies. We spoke about this pasuk here, why the bow is mentioned here, and had the potential that it had the bow, the sons of Judah who were spear soldiers, had they known how to be archers, things might have been different. And we did a bit of Gemara in Avodah Zorah, which has taught us the book of the just, what that means. Bezrat Hashem, next time we will go on to the lament itself and delve down into the poetry of David HaMelech. Lydia's got some homework to do. I've even forgotten what the homework was, but it was something to do with Shakespeare. Oh, I remember. Did Shakespeare admit to hoisting on his own petard coming from Megillah Esther? Don't tell us now, Lydia. We want to keep us on a cliffhanger for the next week. You can tell us the beginning of next week's shiur. Bezrat Hashem. Any questions or comments on today's shiur? No, in that case, I shall wish you Shavua Tov. We will restart the Tefillah shiur tomorrow evening at, I think we'll do it early at 7:30, since Mincha is so early now. We'll start at 7:30, not 8 o'clock, for the Tefillah shiur, those who are coming or joining on Zoom. Shavua Tov, everybody.
Sure, thank you.
Shavua Tov, thank you, Johnny.
Shavua Tov, Toda Rabba.